Thank you everyone for joining our lunchtime talk today. Today we'll have Laura to share her insights and actionable tips on how to leverage BA framework to enable your success. Hey Laura, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and kick off your presentation? Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sophie and Greg, for having me here and for everyone for showing up on your lunch hour. Very excited to be here. So yeah, I'll go ahead and share my slides. Let's see. Oh, all good? Are we sharing? All right. Awesome. So a little bit about me. I have been doing some form of business analysis now for over 20 years, and I'm the founder of Bridging the Gap, where we offer a ton of resources to help business start, succeed, and excel in their careers. We are also a training provider endorsed by IABA, and I'm the author of the new book, The Value-Driven Business Analyst, which Sophie was one of the early reviewers of, as well as my older book, How to Start a Business Analyst Career. But really, I think what continues to drive me in terms of being part of this profession and this community is the desire to empower all of us to amplify our impact and really thrive in our careers, which I believe also enables us to thrive in our lives. So that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. We're here today. We're going to talk about, the key responsibilities of business analysts, go through the framework that is the foundation of the book that I just mentioned, the Value-Driven Business Analyst. So I'll teach the 8-step business analysis process at a very high level. And we actually shifted this. I didn't update this slide, but we're going to expose it just quick tips on AI. We're going to do an AI demo. And by that, I mean, each of you will have the opportunity to use an AI prompt and to generate a scope statement for a project that you're working on, or even it could be like a user story or a request that you're working on. So if you have access to an AI tool, one that uses text like a ChatGPT or a Copilot, your company's custom GPT, whatever you feel like you can use, that would be a great thing to have available for about 10 to 15 minutes from now. All right, so when we talk about what value-driven business analysis is and what it really means to be successful as a business analyst, I love how many conversations there were about engaging with our stakeholders and building that trust, because I think that's like the foundational piece. This really speaks to what's the outcome of all of that. And so this is a manifesto that I felt like channeled back in 2009. And it's really what I think captures the essence of what business analysis is. So out of order, we create, or sorry, out of chaos, we create order. Hopefully we don't create order out of chaos, or the other way around. Out of disagreement, we create alignment. Out of ambiguity, we create clarity, but most of all, we create positive change for the organizations we serve. So if I were going to answer that question, how do I know that I'm successful as a business analyst? Is the change a positive one? And all the work that we would do with stakeholders is certainly a component of that, because they define what success looks like, right? And their engagement certainly dictates our success. And I really believe this is true whether or not we have the business analyst title or even the official role or the methodology we use. Somebody who's doing this work in an organization is really truly channeling the essence of business analysis. So this is the 8-step business analysis process framework that we're going to speak to today. And I'm going to review it at a high level here, and then we'll go through each of these steps in a little bit more detail and flesh them out a bit, some more than others, because some we're going to focus on more than others, just because I think they're the places where we have the most opportunities to make a really big strategic impact and really can shift our mindset and our application of the work. But just to cover this, it's designed to work on any sort of software project in any sort of methodology. The first thing people often say when they see this, it looks very waterfall. It is certainly integratable with an agile perspective, and we'll talk about that as we go through, and I'm happy to answer questions about that as well. But we start with just getting oriented, learning enough to make an impact, and start working on the project effectively. And then we look at discovering those primary business objectives, ensuring we're solving the right business problem and have an answer to that question, like, why are we doing this? Then we go to defining scopes. So now that we know what problem we're trying to solve, how or what is the solution to that problem. And we're facilitating a lot in this. It's not that we come up with this as the BAs, but we facilitate that discovery and analysis to get agreement on that at a very high level. And from there, then we have the tools we need to do our business analysis plan. What are the deliverables, the stakeholders, the timelines for a comprehensive solution? And again, this is the BA plan, not the overall project plan, though some of you might also be in project management roles and be responsible for that as well. But as a BA, we would need to know, like, what are the pieces that I need to do to take that scope and make it fully implementable or ready for the team to implement. And so we want to look at that. In an agile context, this could be your product backlog, right? That is essentially the list of deliverables or the stories that you're going to flesh out. And then we go into that work. What are the detailed requirements? There's a lot of discovery, analysis, and validation that happens in there. And from this point forward, we really shift from being a driver of the project to being a bit more of a supporter. So we would support the technical implementation as they implement that solution, and the business as well as they absorb that solution and actually change their day-to-day work to use that solution. And then we close things off by assessing the value that we actually created. A lot happens. What actually did we accomplish along the way? And we want to look at that and celebrate it. And again, I present it in a linear way because I think as humans, we can only absorb so much information at a time. But the reality is that we're often in multiple steps. We'll get into maybe a specific software requirement and we'll realize like we don't actually know why we're doing this. And we might have to step back to step 2, right? And like then really adjust our scope. And then that means we adjust our plan. So like it doesn't mean that once we're done with one step, we never return to it, but it helps us kind of give a sense of progression of how the business analysis work flows through a typical project or initiative. And so what kinds of projects could this work on? I've helped people from all across the world in multiple different countries and all kinds of industries and different kinds of projects as well. It could be that you're on a system implementation or a migration when you're migrating a major system from one system to another, or automating a system, a manual process that is in spreadsheets and putting that into a tool like a CRM tool, something like that. It could be a data warehouse. Like data focus is huge these days, but it's really important to understand what that data means, how we collect that, what the business process is behind the data. So we could go through this whole process for a project like that. It could be a smaller project like a report. We have a team of BAs who go through our programs as part of their onboarding, and they are BI or business intelligence analysts. And when I met with their manager, because like it's part of their onboarding process that all of these BI analysts go through the course that does a deeper dive into this 8-step process. And she said, well, before we like look at the report, I want them to understand what decision is that person requesting the report trying to make, and why is that report essential? Essentially, like how does that report fit into their business process, right? So even like before we start talking about what data we have and how to configure it on a screen, how does that fit into what they're doing in their work, and then using that to then wireframe out, like analyze those details of what the report could look like, and then finally build the report and make sure that they have the right data to make that decision. I thought that was a really holistic, comprehensive way of thinking about it. And also on an enhancement. So we kind of had a lot of big types of projects, but sometimes we're working on, just adding a field to a page or reconfiguring part of a workflow, right? And all of those you could also apply this framework on something relatively small that really is just going to take a few days to implement, or even less. You still want to know why you're doing it, what the scope looks like, what are the deliverables, and kind of carry it through that way. And what else? Is there something else that you're working on? So I always love to hear about people's examples. And this would also be a time to be thinking about, when we get to talking about step 3, what scope statement or what project would you maybe like to have AI help you draft a scope statement for, just to see how that part works. So do you have any other examples of the types of projects you're working on? Feel free to share those in the chat if you do. A business process improvement. Yeah, so that can definitely apply as well. Some of the steps in the process are more geared towards a improvement that has a software component, but we definitely always want to look at that picture of like the whole big picture and not just the software piece. So like definitely could apply that, Letitia. Thank you. Product development. So that comes up a lot. People see that and think it's very internal. You can think of a business process as your customer's process, which might be called more of a customer journey or like a user scenario, things like that. They definitely fit. Compliance projects, they have a big ROI, right? Mostly from risk mitigation and AI chatbots. Craig, that's awesome that you're working with AI chatbots. Yeah, Sophie and Greg were telling me how much further ahead. Well, I don't think they had this perception, but in the US, BAs are really fighting to be part of AI, or maybe not even like aware that um, they should be on the leading edge of AI. And I think it's very a tech focused space here in the US, in Australia, New Zealand, and across the world. It's like the BAs are leading this, which I think is really what we want to have happening. So we have a lot to learn from all of you doing some of that great work. Okay. But similarly, even for an AI chatbot, right, you want to go through and understand like the why behind it. And so we'll speak to that today too. So let's just look at getting oriented. So this is step one, and there's a few different facets of this. And you really can't deliver value if you don't know where you are and where you're headed. And not all movement is movement in the right direction. We can be really busy and feel like we're really overworked and get a lot of like stuff done, but actually be kind of headed off in the wrong direction. And so clarifying our role is really important. I have had most of my biggest mistakes in my career or broken relationships were because I was trying to do something that I thought was my job that somebody else also thought was their job, right? And that created unnecessary conflict. So knowing what the expectations of your role are and resetting those expectations or managing those expectations as you go is incredibly important. Not every role looks the same. And even within the same company, if you move teams, the role could look very different. You're understanding who your primary stakeholders are that you need to get engaged, as well as who the primary decision maker is, as well as what's already happened in the project. So a lot of tension with stakeholders can be like, I've talked about this to 5 people before, or I've explained this to so and so. And so when you're more aware of that history, you can manage that relationship and manage that communication and kind of review that work and use it to the best of your ability, but then kind of come in understanding that they might be frustrated because you're the 5th person they've told about what they wanted, and you can manage that relationship better. And then also your existing systems and processes, what is already in place. So if you're doing a business process improvement, what exists today that gives you the foundation for what you want to improve. When you're doing an AI chatbot, how is that support handled today? It can give you a lot of information that you could use to train the AI, to think through the process for AI, right? So just understanding that current state gives you a lot of grounding. So that kind of helps you set the stage. And then we look at the why. And I just want to emphasize that, business objectives can really be called a lot of different things. So some BAs or some organizations call them business requirements, business needs, desired outcomes. What is the ROI? What are the KPIs, right? Those are all different ways of talking about business objectives. So if you feel like either my organization doesn't do this or we do this, but I'm not part of it, maybe it's just that they're using a slightly different terminology and you could kind of find that place. And also, we're going to go through a scope statement as an example. I love the scope statement because it's just a couple pages long, but it could be in a completely different document. It could be in a business case, it could be in a project charter. And if there is no frequently referenced deliverable, often the easiest way to bring some visibility to the business objectives is to add it to a deliverable that already exists, that people are already paying attention to towards the beginning of the project, and kind of add some of these pieces in versus saying we need to do this extra thing. So just kind of want to give grace and flexibility. Like the process is not necessarily about having a specific document or like checking a specific box, but really about looking at where would be the best place given our structure to include these things. And when we're talking about business objectives, what we're really trying to accomplish here is identifying a set of between 2 and 5 objectives that are actionable and clear. And they need to fit together logically so you can see how one will support another. And they really do need to guide you towards some sort of meaningful solution option. So, as the BA, your work is to discover these from the stakeholders, right? You don't have to make them up or be responsible for them. But you often will find it helpful to draft possible objectives to help stakeholders understand the possibilities. And like if you're asking them like, why is this important to you, and they're like, it's just important, make it happen. You can propose some objectives that they might have a reaction to. This is a great place to use generative AI as well, just to describe your project and ask for ideas that then you could present to stakeholders. So the sample here, this would be for a mobile insurance application or a mobile application for a home insurance company. And we have a few different objectives. We have one for reducing the average time a client spends or a claim agent spends preparing and submitting a claim, reducing follow-up calls from both homeowners and contractors, and then increasing adoption of homeowner use of the online web application. So that would be a sample of potential objectives that kind of fit together logically and show you, kind of give you an idea of what the solution would need to do, but without telling, like the solution scope is what the capabilities of the solution are, but these are what are the outcomes once that solution is in place. So it's a really important distinction to get to the true objectives and the why. Okay, so then that brings us to step 3, which is define the scope. And this is where we get to all play with our AI tools together. So this is the sample of the scope statement. It's actually about 3 pages, but I got just the essence of it so it could fit on the slides. And the essential elements of this, and again, these could go in different documents. It could be in an Epic, in an agile environment. It could be in a product. I forget that, like a product requirements document, right? But you would have the overview, the benefits, that's essentially the business objectives. What are the key capabilities? That would be the solution scope or what's in scope. What are some of the assumptions that we're making? The constraints. Constraints, I think, are just such a beautiful piece of information. Um, I often use this, I think I share this example in the book where my daughter does these like 3-color contests. So she has like 100 markers, right, with all these different colors, and she can draw a lot of things. But then if she picks 3 at random, the thing that she draws is totally different than anything she would if she had those 100 markers. And when you think about it, a lot of what we're doing, especially on a tech project, is like picking 3 markers. Like we're not going to change our ERP system and like deploy in a completely new tool every time. Often we're using these existing systems and we need to figure out how to leverage them to achieve this outcome in the most productive way. So understanding those constraints is really important, as is identifying what's out of scope, right? And what's been discussed, but like not in scope. So with this, I do want to give you an opportunity to create one, and we'll take a few minutes on this. And this is a template, and thank you so much, Greg, for copying it in so that people don't have to try to type that all out while we're here. But go ahead and whatever AI you have, and the idea behind this, and you could do this with any template that you have, but if you notice that this template had this blue instructional text, right? So this is essentially the training text to train AI. It's what I originally developed to train people to use the templates when I wasn't there to teach them how to use the templates, and it can equally work as well with AI. So the prompt would be like, I'm in a specific kind of company. We're planning a project 2. And this is where you could just, what's a key business objective? What's maybe your idea of what the solution is, right? And then we've uploaded a scope statement, and this is a template we use to scope projects. Can you create a draft of this template using the instructions provided as guidance for the project name if you have one? And then please include, you can this is optional to be, if you want to have questions. I find it's really useful. Like, please include questions that I should be thinking about as well, or questions that you might want to ask the business, right? So I just want to give you an example of what to fill into that first piece. But so this is the whole prompt. So this would be an example description. I think I heard somebody say they might have been in energy, and like, if so, I hope this is relevant. I'm kind of dabbling and exploring some energy things and learning new things. And so I'm trying to bring that into my presenting as examples. But say I'm in a company that's responsible for integrating renewable energy sources into our energy grids. Our goal is to store as much renewable energy as possible and only resort to traditional methods when needed to meet demand and lack of availability. We're updating our capacity management software. So like that's the solution or piece of the solution, right? To track energy source and prioritize renewable energy sources. And then I would continue on with the rest of the prompt. Let's just take an example of a couple of sentences that you might put in to give AI something to go from. I'll give you a minute to put in your own, and then we'll talk about what you get as a result. Anybody stuck on any part of this? I guess I want to open that up. If you're stuck, please let me know. And when you're done, I can go back, but how well did AI do? Like, was this a complete waste of time in the energy resources for AI? That would be a 1. 5, I would say a 5 is this is an 80% draft that I can work from, right? We're not expecting AI to be perfect. We're not expecting it to have everything we need, but like, wow, this gives me a really good start and it's saving me a lot of time. That to me would be a 5. And 3 would be, it's an okay starting point. I'm going to have to rework some bits. It's going to save me a little bit of time. It's made me think of a few new things, but like I have a lot of work to do. Oh, Selvin got a 5. That's amazing. Letitia got a 4. All right. So there's some good answers. 4.5, 5, a lot of really good ones. Does anybody that's like a 4.5 or 5 want to share like how well it did or what they thought it was the most useful part of it? I'm assuming people are allowed to come off mute if they would like to. Yeah. It's okay too. I thought we'd have a lot more 1s, 2s, and 3s. Okay. Definitely a great start. Okay. What felt the most useful? Yeah. So Sophie says, I love it. Gives me a list of potential stakeholders that I need to engage with. Yeah, that's getting impressive too. And that wasn't happening like 6 months ago when I taught this technique. It was sort of like, it would just, yeah. Things are getting better. Solvent, it saves a lot of your time thinking it through, helps in peer review and making it right. Yes, for sure. Yeah. And again, just to stress, like this is a starting point, right? It's not the final thing. You have complete domain to edit and change, and but it can give like just a lot of structure to get things started. And you can do this with any deliverable. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. So some additional questions and prompts, and I think I saw a note, we will be sending out the slides after, but just to kind of think now that you've got a conversation going with AI, to me, the most valuable part when I'm in these is to kind of then continue to go back. So as you're in this project, like, oh, this issue has come up, right? Like, how would I handle that given the scope of this project? Or here are the things I want to update, or here's a constraint we have, right? So it could be your budget, your timeline, your systems. Like, what can we do to work within this constraint? What departments or roles should I be getting involved? Can you provide more detail about this feature? What are some alternatives to a capability? What are some pros and cons of automating versus keeping this a manual process, right? Like, I like to test AI and have AI help test my thinking and test my assumptions. Like, should I be doing this? What could I do instead if, we had unlimited resources? So just kind of being in a creative mode and seeing what comes back. It's also always really interesting. Sometimes then you can ask too many questions and it gets confused, just like a smart high schooler would get confused. And you have to kind of back out and restart. But a lot of times you can kind of go and get some more detail. Could also start to detail into each section and give it some, like, here's what I'm thinking the objectives are. Could you update the entire document based on these revised objectives, right? And kind of use it to continue that thread and continue editing and refining as you go. The other piece that I like to add to a scope document, and scope and the BA planning step are really the ones we're going to spend the most time on tonight, though we'll talk about each of them a bit, is the system context diagram. So this shows how one core system interacts or interfaces with other systems. And if your core system was the AI chatbot or your new enterprise system, particularly a new enterprise system, what are the other systems it needs to interact with, and what data, just at a high level phrase, is getting passed and pulled from each of those systems. I think I saw somebody say they're doing like a systems integration project, like a diagram like this is really essential in a scope statement. And you're not getting into the detailed data mapping at this point. Like, I also teach those techniques and skills, but you're really, just at a high level, what's going back and forth. And these are the things, when you miss an integration point and you discover it like at the end of the project, that tend to hold things up. And so flushing those out and getting some validation of those early can be really helpful. Okay. That brings us to step 4, which is formulating your plan. So this is where you get a lot of clarity on what do you need to do to successfully define the detailed requirements for this project. And it's going to answer a lot of questions about timeline. It's also a great tool to engage your stakeholders. And I know that was a hot topic for a lot of you. So it includes your types of deliverables. So given your methodology and the scope of the project, are you doing current and future state processes? Because this is a business process improvement project. Are you doing use cases, user stories, product timelines, data models, right? Wireframes, like what are the types of deliverables that make sense given what your implementation team needs? And then what are the specific deliverables? And I'm going to show you an example of this, but what are the specific deliverables? So if you you just need processes, what are all the business processes that you would need to work through as part of the scope? So that speaks to the scope. And then what stakeholders need to be involved. And this goes really a long ways towards managing their expectations for their involvement, which is essential to getting things done as a BA. Like, you can look at, like, I'm going to need you involved in these pieces. And then here's the timeline for that. And then hopefully somebody would tell you, well, wait, I'm on vacation for like the 2 weeks that we're supposed to be working on that. So you can adjust. Those are really hard things to find out at the last minute, because then you're on, crunched for a neuron deadline and they're not available. And we know business analysis does not happen in a vacuum, right? So the plan could look like this, where you've got your list of deliverable names here along the left. And another great way to use AI is if you put in your estimated effort, what the duration is, meaning, it's going to be 20 hours. I think I can finish this in 4 weeks, given stakeholder availability and other things. And then also any of your dependencies. So one deliverable being dependent on another, and then a start date for the project. And you can have AI give you the rest of the dates. Often the first time you do this, you're going to be like, those dates are completely unrealistic. And so that helps you identify assumptions. The assumption might be like, oh, I'm actually only spending 10 hours a week on this project. So, right, so like redo the timeline, same inputs, but I assume I'm working 10 weeks or 10, not 10 weeks, 10 hours a week. Or assume that I have to accommodate so-and-so's vacation or my own vacation, or this, the holidays, or however you want to do it. And so building some of those assumptions in helps, make your plan more credible, but also having AI generate the dates also helps you identify those assumptions, because you'll see dates that just won't work. Okay. And then we get to actually do the piece that is such like the big effort of the detailed requirements. And what I want to just kind of take away from this slide is that it is still an iterative process, right? So even once we've gotten to this point and we've done all this upfront work, that really does make this part of the process smoother and more targeted because we understand what we're solving, we understand what's in scope and not in scope. We have our plan that we're working through, but there's still that discovery piece. We're doing some discovery with our stakeholders, we're analyzing, we're reviewing and validating, which might bring up more questions. And you go through that process for every deliverable on your plan. And really, a top tip here is, and I think this is the week that we shared the video about sequencing your BA work, right? Is to find a way to sequence it, but also a rhythm with your team. Like, is this a stakeholder team you can meet with once a week or twice a week? And where you have a rhythm where you're kind of working through things a bit at a time? Is it a team that you need to work with for a full day, like once a month? Whatever that rhythm is, really does help set you up for success and also manage that expectation around time. And this is the piece as well where we would use the full set of business analysis techniques. So I mentioned, we have this foundational process framework that's along the bottom. That's the 8 steps that we're focused on tonight. At Bridging the Gap, we also teach business level, software level, and information or data level techniques that are all different techniques that you can draw from depending on the type of project and the scope of the project. And so having a set of techniques that includes multiple perspectives, whatever those techniques are. Like, you're going to find something different when you look through the lens of a data model like an ERD than you will when you look through the lens of a process flow diagram. And when you're starting to look through some of those different lenses, that's when you find the requirements that you might miss when you're just looking through your primary lens, whatever that is. And my very first role as a BA, it was all use cases all the time. And then we did a little bit of data. Like, we didn't really look at the process. We just were knee deep in the software requirements. And we missed a lot of things because we weren't looking at the process. So, like, having those multiple perspectives is really in service to you. And again, you can use AI here. We've kind of talked through this quite a bit. All right, so we're going to kind of breeze through the last few steps so that we have plenty of time for your questions. If you do have questions, feel free to get those in. This slide is back up because I mentioned this at the beginning. In between step 5 and 6, like, there's an energy shift. Like, the BA is really driving the show to this point, or driving the process. And we are still want to be actively engaged and actively a part of the team. But now it's up to the other teams to pick up the ball and kind of bring the project home while we're there, not just cheering them on, but also being really proactive and actively involved to the extent that it makes sense. Right. So when it comes to supporting the technical team, we could be reviewing the designs. I think that being able to sit into any sort of design meeting or any sort of technical discussion about the requirements is both a huge learning opportunity in terms of learning about the tech, but also gives you that perspective of, paying attention to, is this truly meeting the requirements? Is this really the problem is this solving the problem that we want to have solved? And also, are there things that we could do easily that I didn't think would be feasible, but really we can meet some additional business needs without increasing the technical scope, and being on the lookout for those kinds of things. So there's a lot of reason to be involved in those discussions. You do need to be aware, not to drive the technical discussion, right? That was my very first project. I made a huge rookie mistake. I tell this story in the book of deciding what the technical design should be. And I had to back up about 25 steps in order to move forward successfully. You can also review test plans and test cases, being, of course, available to answer questions and then resolve any issues. So if something becomes infeasible and you got to go back to the business, being part of that discussion, because often if a technical person, goes right to the business, they're going to get an answer, but it might not take into account all of the other impacts of all the other requirements. And so that's a really important piece as well. And then equally, we want to be thinking about the business implementing the solution. So another, one of my experiences, this one thankfully wasn't mine, but I worked with a company who had implemented a document management system. And there was a location that it was implemented for, and they were actually, the goal was to eliminate paper waste and to make the process more efficient. And after they deployed this tool, that branch of the company was printing things multiple times to
I think I lost Laura. Is everybody the same?
Yeah, seems sure.
Frozen and thought there.
Yep. Give her some time to get back. She might just rejoin us in the call. And in the meantime, I think we can all just have a look at the Slido questions on the Slido. I think there is already 11 questions on the board, and go through them and vote for the questions that you would love to be asked, be answered. And hopefully once Laura gets back, we can just quickly wrap up the presentation and go into the Q&A session. You unmute, Laura?
Hello. All right, we
Welcome
lost
back.
internet. I'm so sorry. Thank you. I don't know that I can share my slides. I'm on my phone since we lost internet. But I think we were pretty close to the end. So is it okay if I just speak through them? Would that be the most effective? And then,
Go for it.
yeah. Okay. Awesome. And we will send these at the end. So we were talking about helping the business implement the solution and all of those things. I believe that's where I got cut off. And so really step 8, our final step, is assessing the value. And what I really think want to share kind of about that is how, how important it is to create a culture of successful projects and one project leading to another and some sense of progress. So a lot of companies are moving towards more data-driven decisions, and that's definitely something to be involved with as a BA, but equally important is crafting some sort of narrative. So what's the story? And if you don't have metrics, can you show a process map with boxes X'd out because those steps have been automated, or highlight the steps that have been automated, right? So how can you shape a story of what's changed and share that with the organization? And that brings us to the full framework. And I always like to close with my mantra: on every successful project, you'll find a business analyst. And if you don't know who that is, it's probably you. And they may or they may not have the title. So thank you for doing the work that you do. And we still have some time for questions. Yeah. Apologies for the issues. Yeah.
No problem, Laura. Thank you so much. I will reshare my screen and let's have a look at the Q&A board. And thanks again for this awesome sharing, very actionable insights. What's my
It looks like our internet came back. So I'm going to join my computer as well. It'll be a little easier than.
Sure. Okay. Everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Right. So Laura, you can unmute again. You can. Let's have a look at the first one. I think that's a good question. What do you advise if you are joining a project that is already mid-flight and you can clearly see that there is no clarity on the business objectives?
Yes. Sorry, now I'm in two places. Trying to like. Apologies. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I was echoing for myself. Okay. So yes, if you are in the middle and there's not clarity, you're probably in that either BA planning phase or in the detailed requirements. You can actually take it kind of piece by piece. So you could start with, here's, with this segment of the requirements, let's get clarity on the objectives before we dive into the details. So you could take that approach. You could also take the approach where, because I'm joining midstream, this is a great opportunity to reset. And you're not going to spend months or as much time as you would spend if you were starting the project from scratch, but to just do a quick reset, like, I just want to confirm these are the business objectives, or can we get some clarity on those because they'll help us with the detailed requirements. I think the biggest piece there is to like present that work and clarifying the business objectives as part of the work that needs to be done to clarify the detailed requirements. Because the value of that is that the clearer you are on the objectives, often the smaller the scope. Because you're going to find ways to solve the true problem that are smaller and easier to implement than if you were just kind of doing all the things that people might think of if they get licensed to talk about this kind of solution, right? So you're really like, what are the essential pieces we need to do to solve the problem? And you talk about it kind of, you meet people where they are at, but you still have that conversation. It's a great question.
Thanks, Laura. And I definitely agree that joining in the middle of the project is a great start with fresh eyes to see any potential issues.
Yeah.
All right, next question. How much do technical realities affect what you should put in the prompt? For example, exact brand type of system, the specific things you are integrating with?
Yeah, it depends on what you're looking for. So if you're looking for creative ideas and like out of the box thinking, you might just say what type, like the type of system you're implementing. But if you're looking to constrain your scope within the functionality provided by a such and such solution, then you want to be not just even mention that solution, but maybe even upload training documentation from that solution or system documentation so that it can digest that for you and help you figure out how to use it. Like when I'm trying to solve a really challenging technical problem, we have like 5 or 6 different systems we use in my business to kind of stitch everything together. And I will be like, these are the tools, this is how they integrate. What are some ways that we could solve this problem? And you get a much better answer there if you're looking for the technical side.
Yeah. So I think we can always start from the high level, less detail, and then gradually going through. Oh, next question is how AI is changing the BA role and BA framework process. Is AI improving the efficiency of BA people?
I hope so. I think it will. If it hasn't yet, it certainly will. And I think like the other side of this question is then what are the opportunities it opens up? So if we are spending ideally less time on documentation, that gives us more time for relationships. It gives us more time to kind of consider multiple solutions, to brainstorm, to do the creative thinking versus getting locked in right away. So yes, I think it's changing how we do the steps of BA, but we don't want it to become the end all be all and sort of remove the whole framework. So I think the framework sticks. It's how do we use AI to move through it and to make it more effective as we go.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like we are the driver behind AIs and the framework could be a map for us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to admit, like, it takes a lot of practice too. Like I use AI for some non-BA related tasks in my business. And like, it was just this one time, I've done this several times with a certain kind of task that I finally felt like I got it. I knew just what nuggets to give AI and like how to kind of work through that process and what to ask for when and how to start high level and drill in. So you kind of have to start using it for something, and then it becomes more intuitive to work with. It's just like any new skill, I suppose.
Learn to work with the AI. Cool.
Mhm.
Next question. Would you do the business plan and deliverables in step 4 alongside with the project manager?
For sure. Right. So in an ideal world, a project manager would ask you for that kind of BA plan and incorporate it into the overall team's plan and like make sure all the dependencies between everybody's different tasks are identified if you're working on a kind of a larger project that has that. In a non so normal world, like sometimes the dates are just in there and you have to work with them or present the plan as a way to get some adjustments. But yes, you would do that alongside the project manager.
Cool. Alignment is quite important. Next question. How do we advocate for benefit realization or value analysis after implementing the solution? It is always neglected once the project is done.
Yeah, and that is probably one of the areas where I think most business analysts are still carving out their role. So I know I spoke to that as like, oh, this is such a great thing to do, right? And I want to also reflect the reality of that it is a challenge, and it's not always a license ask or like a asked for part of our role. So just start with like the very smallest thing you could do, and include it maybe even in your requirements discussions or sort of in the retrospective or whatever. If there's any sort of recap or any sort of reflective exercise, like look for a way to include a piece of that, or write your own email at the end kind of summarizing the effort. Just like look for a piece and kind of start to build from there, because as people see it, I think they will see the value of it, and then you can extend.
Absolutely. I sometimes I see like celebration email of closing a project, and people will quote some of the numbers like how many things we achieved. Those kind of quantified results would be a nice add-on to wrap up projects.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Next is how important is a BA's role in defining product MVP and value slicing in agile initiatives to be able to prove value or fail fast?
This is kind of a level of agile that I'm not as much of an expert in. So I think the BA role could be really important there. I think when you're talking about value, this is the business objectives piece, right? So this is what BAs ideally should understand. And so if we're talking about how will we prove value or fail fast, that would be what deliverables do we need, or what's the first piece that we could work on, um, and prioritizing that because you understand the business. I think there's a huge opportunity for BAs in that space, but it's a different mindset or a different way of approaching it.
Yeah, I think BA in the product space is quite different, and we potentially can organize another session to go through that in depth. Next question. How do we stop the stakeholders thinking that AI is going to shorten project timeline and result in everything done in a rush?
That is a fun one. When did we not have this problem, right? Of thinking that, like, I remember I was teaching wireframes like 20 years ago. I was using wireframes and then teaching them maybe 15 years ago. And like people would be like, oh, we can't show wireframes because people are going to think it's just going to be done, right? Once we show them some sort of a working prototype. So I think we need to educate people, like just like we educated them on what a wireframe was, that it wasn't working software, like that AI also takes time to train, that it maybe is going to get us an 80% result, and then educate them also on, I know there's the code aspect piece of that. So it's really more the tech aspect that AI, it takes a while and it's not perfect. And it like being faster is not always the goal. It's what do we really want to accomplish and how do we want to accomplish that? Yeah, I just think it's kind of a funny thing that like, oh, now that we have this, like everything is going to be done so quickly, like when we haven't even learned how to use it yet and are just exploring the tip of the iceberg of the possibilities. So speaking to some of those truths.
But they set the expectations right at the beginning is crucial.
Yes.
So next one is how could you use a context diagram when you're only working with one system in it could be a very big one.
That is interesting. Not everybody has their favorite tools. What I would say to this, don't try to force your project into that tool. So in this, everybody has their tool. The system context diagrams are one of my favorites. And so I shared it and celebrated it, but it might not be the tool. If you only have one system, it's not going to show you much. You probably would be better with some sort of a work breakdown structure or something that shows the components of those systems and how they interact. If there's some interaction between them, maybe one of them would be primary and you could use the system context diagram to show that, but you don't have to. Choose something that's going to show something meaningful for your system versus, forcing it into that specific tool. Yeah. Other options from a scope statement perspective would be like a high-level business process model, an overview of key features, or an ERD would be a really good one. Like a high level, what are the key types of information the system stores and how do those relate to one another can be other great options.
Thank you, Laura. Next one is for those trying to land their first BA role. Do you think getting a certification helps? And if so, which one would you recommend?
It can help. I think what helps the most to land your first VA role is to get really, really clear about the experience that you do have and to look back at your career and identify the transferable skills, the times you've done work that was like a business analyst and use that, because most employers, I'm not as familiar with the market, but most employers here in the US are still hiring for experience. And a certification, especially at an entry level, you're not going to get like a CBAP. You would be getting like an ACBA or kind of a basic certification is going to show a certain level of knowledge. But your best bet is to be able to really speak to those transferable skills. And it doesn't have to be like writing requirements. It can be how you engage with stakeholders and how you ask questions and how you think through problems and solutions. And so that's where I would put a lot of effort.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. And I think next one is also from someone new in career BAs. Like, what are your top 3 suggestions for someone who's just starting out as a BA?
So it'd be like starting out in a new role, or do you think starting out getting into?
Yeah, we don't know who asked this question.
Yeah.
Maybe
Okay.
my feeling is that.
Sorry. Okay. Well, I kind of just spoke to the getting into, so I'll answer it from the perspective of starting out as. So, like on a new project, your first role, be clear about like take time to clarify what your role is, and even if you've taken training, like it might not include everything that was in your training program. And so really working to set those expectations with your stakeholders, be ready to be overwhelmed and have a system for assimilating information, kind of hosting information and working through that. And that's a good thing. I think overwhelm is actually a good thing. It shows that you're getting information, and use a process like the one I've taught to help walk through things versus feeling like you have to make it up alone.
Thank you, Laura. And definitely maybe find some mentors or someone more experienced with you and learn from them from doing things together. It'll be great.
That was like the 4th thing on my mind. And I was like, oh, I got to my 3. Yeah.
I think we're running out of time for the Q&A, but we've still got 8 questions. Maybe we can review that afterwards and see if we want to answer some of them or not. Yeah, so I guess we just wrap up this session quickly. And thank you so much, Laura, for sharing this BI framework. And I definitely learned a lot, especially the AI prompt to craft the scope statement. So if you are enjoying our events, please feel free to share with your friends or colleagues. And also our next event will be happening on the 20th of November in Auckland in person, and will be delivered by Ben Yu. We will also upload the video to our YouTube channel and also share the slides that Laura will send to us to all the participants in this call via Meetup. So we're looking forward to see you all next time in our future events. And thank you, Laura, again for your time and sharing. Awesome.
Thank you so much for having me here. Yeah.
Thank you. See you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everyone.